I'm Amanda Wilson, 28, and I still hear the splintering wood of my apartment door in my nightmares. 2 weeks ago, my mother's voice echoed through the hallway. "Break down the door. This is our son's apartment." Except it wasn't their son's apartment, it was mine. I'd been living there for 3 years after escaping my family's control. My boyfriend Jason stood frozen beside me as my father and brother rammed against the door, the hinges giving way. What happened next would expose decades of family secrets and end with half my family facing criminal charges. Before I dive into the most traumatic day of my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. This story about family control, betrayal, and ultimately justice is unfortunately more common than we think. If you've ever felt controlled by family or witnessed something similar, hit that like button and subscribe to show support for those still living in these situations. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Riverside, a small town where everyone knows everyone, or at least they think they do. My mother Eleanor ruled our household with an iron fist disguised in velvet gloves. My father Robert, a quiet accountant, mostly stayed out of her way, nodding along to keep the peace. Then there was my older brother Michael, 2 years my senior, and my mother's undeniable favorite. From the outside, we looked perfect. Eleanor made sure of it. We attended church every Sunday, front row, dressed immaculately. We volunteered at community events. My parents hosted charity fundraisers in our meticulously kept home. People would often tell me how lucky I was to have such a wonderful family. If only they knew what happened behind closed doors. Eleanor controlled everything. What we ate, who we befriended, what we wore, even what books we read. When I was 8, I made a friend at school named Lily. After Lily came over once, Eleanor decided she was a bad influence because Lily had asked for a second cookie. I wasn't allowed to see her outside school again. "Amanda, do you really need that second helping? Your face is already looking fuller than last week." Comments like this started when I was just 10 years old. When I was 12, I joined the school choir without asking permission first. Eleanor showed up during practice and pulled me out, explaining loudly to my teacher that I had responsibilities at home that made extracurriculars impossible. I spent that afternoon reorganizing the pantry while Eleanor watched. My father never contradicted her. "Your mother knows what's best," he'd say with a sigh. "It's easier if we all just go along with it." Michael learned quickly to align with Eleanor. By his teens, he was parroting her controlling behaviors. "Mom's right, you shouldn't wear that shirt. It makes you look desperate for attention," he'd say, knowing it would earn him Eleanor's approving nod. I developed strategies to survive, keeping journals hidden inside school textbooks, developing secret friendships Eleanor didn't know about, creating a mental inventory of safe topics versus things that would trigger her control. Despite everything, I excelled academically. School became my escape, and I poured myself into studies. By senior year, I had a 4 gigapascals and was applying to colleges. My English teacher, Mrs. Bennett, helped me apply for scholarships. When I received an offer from State University with a full scholarship, I was ecstatic. Eleanor was not. "You're not moving 3 hours away. The community college is perfectly good, and you can live at home," she announced at dinner, as if the matter was settled. When I argued, she listed all the dangers of campus life and reminded me how ungrateful I was after everything she had done for me. Later that week, I found my acceptance letter torn up in the trash. When I tried to contact the university about sending another, I discovered someone had already called, pretending to be me, declining the offer. The day my scholarship opportunity disappeared was the day I began planning my escape. It would take 6 more years before I succeeded. I attended the local community college while living at home, where Eleanor could monitor my comings and goings. She insisted I major in business administration rather than my preferred choice of psychology. "Psychology is for people who want to blame their parents for their problems," she said dismissively. During those years, the control only tightened. Eleanor insisted on driving me to classes, claiming it saved money. She happened to schedule family events whenever I made plans with classmates. She checked my phone regularly, reading my texts and monitoring my calls. It was during my 3rd year at community college that I met Jason Parker. We were paired for a project in our accounting class. He was kind, funny, And most importantly, he noticed things others didn't. "Does your mom always call you that many times during a 2-hour study session?" he asked after our third meeting. That simple question broke something open in me. For the first time, someone was seeing the control for what it was. Jason became my lifeline. Not in a romantic way at first, we were just friends who talked honestly. He helped me see that what I was experiencing wasn't normal family dynamics but control and emotional abuse. We would meet at the library where I could speak freely without Eleanor listening in. "You need to get out," he said after I described how Eleanor had gone through my backpack and read my class notes, then criticized my handwriting for being too showy. I knew he was right, but the idea terrified me. Eleanor had made sure I understood I couldn't survive without the family. Besides, where would I go? How would I afford it? I started planning in secret. I opened a bank account Eleanor didn't know about, using the library's address for statements. I worked part-time at the campus bookstore, telling Eleanor it was required for one of my classes, and saved every penny. I gradually moved important documents, birth certificate, social security card, driver's license to a locker at the gym. I told Eleanor I joined for a class. It took almost 2 years to save enough for first and last month's rent, plus a small emergency fund. During that time, Jason and I grew closer, eventually starting to date, though I kept it secret from my family. The day I moved out was a Sunday in June. Eleanor, Robert, and Michael were attending an all-day church fundraiser. I had claimed illness to stay home. Jason arrived with his pickup truck at 9 a.m. sharp. We loaded my essential belongings, clothes, a few books, my laptop, and were gone within an hour. I left a note on the kitchen table explaining I had moved out and would contact them when I was ready. My new apartment was in the city, 45 minutes away. It was small, just a studio, but it was mine. Jason helped me set up my meager furniture, a futon, a desk from a thrift store, a small dining table with 2 chairs. "This is the first day of your real life," he said as we stood in the center of my new home. The fallout was immediate and intense. Eleanor called 37 times that first day. When I didn't answer, she sent Michael to my workplace. He caused such a scene that my supervisor had to threaten to call security. Robert showed up at my apartment 2 days later, begging me to come to your senses before your mother gets really upset. For weeks, the pressure continued. Eleanor cycled through tactics, crying voicemails about how I was killing her with worry, angry messages accusing me of being brainwashed by outsiders, then sweet offers to forgive everything if I just came home. I tried maintaining limited contact at first. I agreed to Sunday dinners, thinking boundaries could work. They didn't. Eleanor used these meetings to criticize my apartment, my job, my appearance. She would send Michael to check on me unannounced, which usually meant him showing up at midnight demanding I let him in to make sure I was safe. After 6 months of boundary violations, I made the painful decision to cut contact completely. I changed my phone number, asked my workplace to put me on a different shift, and warned my apartment manager not to give out any information about me. The freedom was both exhilarating and terrifying. For the first time, I could decide what to eat without calculating Eleanor's reaction. I could wear bright colors that had previously been deemed attention-seeking. I could have friends over without preparing them for Eleanor's interrogations. Jason was my rock through everything. His parents, Diana and Greg, welcomed me into their family without the strings I'd grown up with. They never asked for anything in return for their kindness, which was a foreign concept to me. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Reynolds, who specialized in family trauma. She helped me understand the patterns I'd grown up with weren't my fault. "You didn't cause the abuse, you can't control it, and you can't cure it," became my mantra. My career at the accounting firm was taking off. I made friends, real friends who didn't have to pass Eleanor's approval. I learned to recognize my own needs and feelings after a lifetime of suppressing them. For 3 years, I maintained no contact except for occasional updates through my cousin Sarah. She would let me know about major family events, like when my grandmother passed away. Through Sarah, I learned that Eleanor had created an elaborate narrative about my absence, telling people I was going through a phase or that I had fallen in with a bad crowd. I was healing, building a life on my terms. I thought the worst was behind me. Then came the LinkedIn notification that Michael had viewed my profile. 1 week later, everything exploded. My grandfather James was always different from the rest of the family. He was kind without agenda, generous without keeping score. As a child, I treasured my visits with him, free from Eleanor's critical eyes. He would slip me books Eleanor would have deemed inappropriate and tell me stories about places beyond our small town. When Sarah called to tell me grandfather had passed away, I grieved privately. I hadn't seen him in 3 years, though we had exchanged occasional letters through Sarah. His funeral was the one family event I considered breaking my no-contact rule for, but the thought of facing Eleanor kept me away. 2 weeks after his funeral, Sarah called again. "Amanda, there's something you should know," she said, her voice unusually serious. "Grandfather left you money. A lot of money." According to Sarah, grandfather had left each grandchild a significant inheritance, approximately $175,000 each. But unlike the others, my inheritance came with a specific stipulation. It would be distributed directly to me, not through my parents. "Eleanor is livid," Sarah explained. "She's been telling everyone you're not mentally stable enough to handle that kind of money." Days later, I received an official letter from Thomas Reynolds, grandfather's estate lawyer, confirming the inheritance and requesting a meeting. When I arrived at his office, Mr. Reynolds explained that grandfather had been concerned about Eleanor's financial control. "Your grandfather made some very specific provisions," he said, sliding a sealed envelope across his desk. "He asked that I give you this personally." Inside was a handwritten letter from grandfather. "My dear Amanda, if you're reading this, I've passed on. I've watched with heartbreak as Eleanor controlled and manipulated you throughout your life. I regret not intervening more directly, though I tried in small ways to show you a different path. There's something you should know. Years ago, I set up college funds for all my grandchildren. When your time came, Eleanor convinced your father to sign the money over to her control $30,000 that was meant for your education. She claimed you weren't ready to manage it. I've never forgiven myself for not fighting harder. This inheritance is my attempt to right that wrong. It comes directly to you, with no intermediaries. Use it to build the life you deserve, free from control. With love and faith in you, Grandfather." I sat in shocked silence as Mr. Reynolds explained the legal details. Not only had Eleanor stolen my college fund, but grandfather had known about her emotional abuse all along. The complex feelings overwhelmed me: relief at the financial security, grief for grandfather, anger at the revelation of theft, and a strange validation that someone had seen the truth of my childhood. That evening, Jason and I discussed what the inheritance meant. We talked about furthering my education, perhaps a down payment on a home someday, establishing real financial security. "This is your chance to build something that's completely yours," Jason said, squeezing my hand. The next morning, I had 5 missed calls from Eleanor. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. I let them go to voicemail but listened to the messages later. "Amanda, we need to discuss your grandfather's estate," she said in the first message, her voice artificially sweet. By the 5th message, the facade had cracked. "This is a family matter. Your father and I should be handling this money until you're more stable." I sent a single text message in response. "I am accepting my inheritance directly, as grandfather intended. Please don't contact me again." Her reply came minutes later. "This is a family matter. We'll handle it in person." I dismissed the implied threat, a mistake I would soon regret. That evening, Jason and I discussed our future plans, blissfully unaware of what was building. We even joked about Eleanor's reaction, feeling secure in my apartment with its chain lock and the security camera I'd installed after Michael's previous unannounced visits. Neither of us imagined just how far Eleanor would go to maintain control. Saturday morning started like any other. Jason had stayed over, and we were making breakfast together, pancakes and coffee, weekend music playing softly in the background. My phone pinged with a security notification, showing movement in the hallway outside my apartment. I glanced at the feed and froze. Eleanor, Robert, and Michael were standing outside my door. "Jason," I whispered, pointing to my phone screen. His eyes widened as he recognized my family. The pounding started immediately after 3 sharp knocks that quickly escalated to a fist hammering against the door. "Amanda, open this door right now!" Eleanor's voice, so familiar and terrifying, made my stomach clench. "What do we do?" Jason asked, keeping his voice low. "Nothing," I replied, my therapist's advice echoing in my mind. "We don't engage. They'll go away." But they didn't. The pounding grew more insistent. "Amanda!" Eleanor shouted. "We need to talk about your grandfather's money. Open the door." Jason took my hand, steadying me. "Should we call the police?" Before I could answer, Eleanor's voice rang out again, but this time she wasn't addressing me. "Break down the door. This is our son's apartment. He needs our help." Confusion washed over me. Son's apartment? What was she talking about? Through the security feed, I watched in horror as Robert and Michael positioned themselves in front of my door. They exchanged glances, nodded, then together rammed their shoulders against it. The door shuddered but held. They stepped back and tried again. The frame splintered slightly. "Stop!" I shouted through the door. "This is my apartment. I'll call the police." "She's delusional," I heard Eleanor tell Robert. "Our son needs intervention before he hurts himself. Break it down." The third ram broke the door open, the chain lock snapping from the wall. Wood splinters flew as my family burst into my apartment. Jason was already on the phone with 911, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We need police immediately. 3 people have broken into our apartment." Eleanor rushed past me, heading straight for my desk where the inheritance paperwork sat in a folder. Robert stood in the doorway, seemingly shocked, as he realized this was clearly not their son's apartment but my home. Michael blocked the exit, his expression dark as he glared at Jason. "Where is he?" Robert asked, looking confused. "Eleanor, you said our son." "She lied to you," I said, grabbing my phone to record what was happening. "There is no son. She just wanted you to break into my apartment." Eleanor ignored the conversation, rifling through my desk until she found the inheritance documents. "Here it is," she said triumphantly, grabbing the folder. I lunged forward, trying to take back my papers. "That's mine." "You have no right." Eleanor yanked the folder away, shoving me in the process. "You've never understood what's best for you. This money needs to be properly managed." Jason moved toward us, still on the phone with 911. "Please hurry," he said urgently. "The situation is escalating." Michael stepped between Jason and me. "Stay out of family business," he growled, then shoved Jason hard into the wall. The sound of Jason's head hitting the drywall made something snap inside me. I reached up and pulled the fire alarm in the hallway just outside my broken door. The shrill alarm did exactly what I'd hoped. Apartment doors opened as neighbors emerged to see what was happening. Witnesses. "Help!" I shouted. "These people broke into my apartment." Eleanor immediately switched tactics, her voice becoming tearful as she clutched the folder to her chest. "My daughter is having a breakdown," she told my neighbor Karen, who had stepped forward. "She stole family money." "That's not true," Karen replied firmly. "Amanda has lived here peacefully for years. I just saw you all break down her door." The elevator dinged, and 2 police officers, their nameplates reading Smith and Rodriguez, stepped into the hallway. They took in the broken door and the tense standoff with professional calm. "What's going on here?" Officer Rodriguez asked. Everyone started speaking at once. Eleanor claiming I was mentally unstable and had stolen family money. Robert stammering about a misunderstanding. Michael insisting they were just trying to help me. Jason explaining about the break-in and assault. "One at a time," Officer Smith said firmly. "Ma'am," he addressed me, "this is your apartment?" "Yes," I confirmed. "They broke in. I have it on camera." I showed him the security feed on my phone, as well as the video I'd started recording after they entered. Officer Rodriguez examined my lease documents while Officer Smith reviewed the video evidence. The security footage clearly showed Eleanor instructing Robert and Michael to break down the door under false pretenses. "We'll need statements from everyone," Officer Rodriguez said. "Sir," she addressed Robert, "you and your family will need to come to the station." "This is ridiculous," Eleanor protested. "We're her parents. We have every right." "Ma'am, breaking and entering is a crime, regardless of relation," Officer Smith interrupted. "So is attempted theft and assault. They led Eleanor, Robert, and Michael out. The inheritance papers safely returned to me. Eleanor continued her performance all the way to the elevator, alternating between tearful pleas about my mental state and angry demands that the officers do their research about the situation. After they left, the full impact hit me. I sank to the floor amid the debris of my broken door, my body shaking uncontrollably. Jason knelt beside me, his arms gentle around my shoulders. "They're gone," he kept saying. "You're safe now." But I didn't feel safe. My home, the one place that had been truly mine, had been violated. The sanctuary I'd built for myself lay in ruins around me. Officer Rodriguez returned after escorting my family out. "We'll need you both to come in for formal statements when you're ready," she said kindly. "Take your time. Someone from Victim Services will contact you about emergency housing if you need it tonight." Jason called his parents, who arrived within an hour. Diana wrapped me in a hug that asked for nothing, while Greg assessed the damage to the door. "You're staying with us tonight," Diana said firmly. No arguments. As we packed overnight bags, I kept replaying the scene in my mind. The way Eleanor had manipulated Robert and Michael. The calculated lie about a non-existent son. The focused determination as she went straight for the inheritance documents. This wasn't an impulsive act of a concerned mother. This was premeditated. She had planned to steal my inheritance by any means necessary. That night, in the safety of Jason's parents' guest room, I made a decision. No more running. No more hiding. It was time to stand up and fight back. If you've ever had your sense of safety shattered by someone who was supposed to protect you, you know how devastating that betrayal feels. What happened next would change everything, not just for me, but for my entire family. Stay with me, because the story of how justice finally came is one I need to share with all of you who've experienced family betrayal. The days following the break-in passed in a blur. Jason and I stayed with his parents while my apartment door was repaired and a security system installed. The property management company was surprisingly supportive, offering to expedite repairs and even waiving fees associated with the damage. My first priority was obtaining an emergency restraining order. The courthouse was intimidating, but the victim advocate assigned to my case, Jennifer, walked me through each step with patience and clarity. "The evidence is strong," she assured me. "The security footage alone makes this a clear-cut case." The temporary restraining order was granted immediately, barring Eleanor, Robert, and Michael from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. Meanwhile, I met with the district attorney assigned to the criminal case. She was a no-nonsense woman named Linda Martinez who laid out the charges my family was facing: breaking and entering, attempted theft, property damage, and in Michael's case, assault for shoving Jason. "These are serious charges," she explained. "Your mother is looking at potential jail time, especially given the premeditated nature of the break-in." The gravity of the situation hit me. Despite everything, sending my mother to jail wasn't something I had ever imagined. My conflicted feelings must have shown on my face. "This isn't your fault," Linda reminded me. "They made their choices. You're just asking for accountability." As news of the incident spread through the family, people began taking sides. Eleanor had immediately begun spinning her version, claiming I was mentally unstable and had stolen family money. Some relatives believed her the same ones who had always admired the perfect family image she projected. But surprisingly, others reached out in support. My Aunt Catherine, Eleanor's sister, called me directly. "I believe you," she said simply. "Eleanor has been controlling and manipulative her entire life. I'm sorry I never stepped in to help you." Cousin Sarah provided additional information about Eleanor's behavior at grandfather's funeral, how she had ranted about the inheritance, claiming grandfather was confused when he made his will. The most shocking discovery came through social media. A friend noticed someone with my photos creating posts about extravagant purchases and partying posts I had never made. It was a fake profile Eleanor had created to prove I was irresponsible with money. The timestamp showed she'd been building this false narrative for months. While preparing for the restraining order hearing, I received a call from Robert, my first direct contact with him since the break-in. "Amanda," he said, his voice tired and small, "I need to explain. He told me Eleanor had convinced him and Michael that I had a male roommate who was dangerously mentally ill and had taken control of my apartment. According to her, this fictional person had stolen my phone and was impersonating me, which explained why I hadn't been responding to family contact. She said we needed to rescue you, he explained. I never would have broken down your door if I'd known it was really your apartment. But you saw me there, I pointed out. You heard me tell you there was no son. His silence spoke volumes about his lifelong pattern of believing Eleanor over evidence right in front of him. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the break-in. I arrived at the courthouse with Jason, his parents, and my victim advocate, Jennifer. Seeing Eleanor, Robert, and Michael in the courthouse hallway sent a wave of anxiety through me, but Jason's steady presence kept me grounded. In the courtroom, Judge Wilkins listened to testimony from both sides. Eleanor painted herself as a concerned mother trying to help her troubled daughter. I presented the security footage, the fake social media profile, and the inheritance documents showing her attempted theft. When Eleanor's attorney suggested the break-in was just a family misunderstanding, Judge Wilkins's expression hardened. Mrs. Wilson, he addressed Eleanor directly. Breaking down someone's door is not a misunderstanding. It's a crime. The judge granted a 3-year restraining order against all 3 family members, with provisions for renewal if necessary. Eleanor's reaction was immediate and dramatic. As we left the courtroom, she began shouting in the hallway about my betrayal and how I was destroying the family. Security had to escort her out, her voice echoing through the building. Michael confronted Jason outside the courthouse, stepping aggressively toward him until a security camera pivoting in their direction made him reconsider. That footage would later be added to his assault case. The preliminary hearing for the criminal charges came next. Eleanor hired an expensive attorney who tried to portray her as a devoted mother concerned about her daughter's well-being. The strategy backfired when the prosecution presented my therapist's professional assessment of the family dynamics and the pattern of control dating back to my childhood. As the evidence mounted, the prosecutor offered Robert and Eleanor a plea deal reduced charges in exchange for testimony about the premeditated nature of the break-in. After decades of following Eleanor's lead, Robert finally broke ranks and accepted the deal. His testimony revealed how Eleanor had meticulously planned the break-in, creating the fictional story about a troubled son to manipulate Robert and Michael into breaking down my door. He admitted that Eleanor had explicitly stated her intention to take the inheritance documents. The family division deepened with Robert's decision. Eleanor refused to speak to him, while Michael remained loyal to her, rejecting his own plea deal despite the overwhelming evidence against him. As Michael's case proceeded to trial, I worked with the victim advocate to prepare my victim impact statement. The process forced me to confront the full scope of damage, not just the physical violation of my home, but the lifelong emotional abuse that had culminated in this desperate attempt to maintain control over me. Your story matters, Jennifer reminded me as we worked on the statement. Your voice deserves to be heard. Despite the legal progress, my emotions remained complicated. There was validation in seeing the legal system acknowledge the wrongdoing, but also grief for the family relationships that might never heal. Most of all, there was a growing determination to use this painful experience to finally break free from patterns of control and abuse that had defined my life for too long. 3 months after the break-in, Michael's trial began. The days leading up to it were filled with anxiety. Despite the restraining order and the legal protections in place, the thought of facing my family in court, especially Michael, who had always been Eleanor's enforcer, left me physically ill. You don't have to do this alone, Jason reminded me as we drove to the courthouse for the first day of proceedings. His parents followed in their car, a visible show of support that meant more than they could know. The courthouse was busier than I expected. A reporter from the local newspaper stood near the entrance, notepad in hand. Apparently, an inheritance battle leading to home invasion was newsworthy in our community. Miss Wilson, would you like to comment on the case? She asked as we approached. I shook my head and kept walking. My story was about to be laid bare in court, but I wasn't interested in trial by media. Inside, the jury selection process began. I watched as potential jurors were questioned about their family relationships and beliefs about parental authority. Some expressed the view that family matters should stay private, exactly the mindset Eleanor had exploited for years to maintain her control. Linda Martinez, the prosecutor, had prepared me well for what to expect. Focus on telling your truth, she had advised during our preparation sessions. The facts are on your side. When it came time for my testimony, I took the stand feeling surprisingly calm. From that elevated position, I could see Eleanor sitting behind Michael at the defense table, her expression a carefully constructed mask of maternal concern. I began by describing my childhood under Eleanor's control, the monitoring, the isolation, the constant criticism. I explained how I had finally escaped at 25, establishing an independent life that Eleanor had never accepted. Then I detailed the events surrounding grandfather's inheritance and the break-in itself. "What did you see when you checked your security camera that morning?" Linda asked. "I saw my mother instructing my father and brother to break down my door, claiming it was their son's apartment when they knew perfectly well it was mine," I replied, my voice steady. During cross-examination, Michael's attorney tried to frame the incident as a family misunderstanding motivated by concern. "Isn't it possible your mother genuinely believed you were in danger?" he asked. "No," I replied firmly. "She went directly for my inheritance documents. She didn't even look around the apartment to check on my well-being." Jason testified next, describing the break-in from his perspective and Michael's assault against him. My neighbors followed, confirming they had witnessed the family breaking in and heard Eleanor's contradictory statements afterward. The police officers who responded that day presented their evidence, including body cam footage that captured the aftermath of the break-in and Eleanor's rapidly changing explanations. Robert's testimony, part of his plea agreement, was perhaps the most damaging. He described in detail how Eleanor had concocted the story about a troubled son, knowing full well it was false. "She told us Amanda was being controlled by someone dangerous," Robert explained, looking older and more defeated than I had ever seen him. "She said we needed to get the inheritance paperwork before this person stole all her money." "Did you believe this story?" Linda asked. Robert hesitated. "I wanted to believe Eleanor was trying to help Amanda. But deep down, I think I knew something wasn't right." "Yet you broke down the door anyway?" "Yes." The simple admission hung in the air. Michael took the stand in his own defense, his testimony a web of contradictions. He claimed he was trying to protect me while simultaneously admitting he knew there was no troubled son in my apartment. When pressed about shoving Jason, he claimed it was self-defense, despite the security footage clearly showing otherwise. An unexpected witness was called next. Mrs. Bennett, my high school English teacher, who had helped me apply for scholarships years ago. "Amanda was one of my brightest students," she testified. "But whenever her mother became involved, she would visibly shut down. When Amanda received a scholarship opportunity, her mother came to my classroom and accused me of interfering in family affairs." Expert witness Dr. Harrison testified about family abuse dynamics, explaining how financial control is often used as a mechanism to maintain power, particularly over adult children attempting to establish independence. "The pattern described here is consistent with long-term emotional and financial abuse," he concluded. After 3 days of testimony, closing arguments were presented. Linda emphasized the premeditated nature of the break-in and the clear intent to steal the inheritance. Michael's attorney tried to portray him as a brother genuinely concerned for his sister's well-being, manipulated by their mother into illegal actions. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours before returning with a verdict: guilty on all counts. Michael's face darkened as the verdict was read. He turned to glare at me, his expression so filled with hatred that I instinctively stepped back. Eleanor was noticeably absent, having chosen not to attend the verdict reading. During the sentencing phase, Judge Thompson addressed the court with unexpected frankness. "Family relationships do not excuse criminal behavior," he stated firmly. "In fact, the betrayal of family trust makes these offenses particularly egregious." Michael was sentenced to 18 months with possibility of parole, mandatory therapy, and restitution payments for the damage to my apartment. As we left the courthouse, I felt an overwhelming sense of validation. For the first time, Eleanor's actions had been officially recognized as wrong, not just by me, but by the justice system. The local newspaper published an article about the case the following day, focusing on the financial abuse angle. The reporter had done her research, interviewing experts about how financial control is often overlooked as a form of family abuse. That evening, as Jason and I processed the trial's conclusion, he surprised me by dropping to one knee in his parents' garden. "Amanda Wilson," he said, holding out a simple ring, "you are the strongest, bravest person I know. Will you marry me?" Through tears of joy, the first purely happy tears I had shed in months, I said yes. 2 weeks after the trial concluded, Jason and I returned to my apartment. The property management company had not only repaired the door, but upgraded it with a reinforced frame and additional security features. Still, walking through that doorway the first time was harder than I expected. The space that had once been my sanctuary now held memories of violation. "We can look for a new place," Jason suggested, sensing my discomfort. "No," I decided. "I won't let them take this from me, too." Just as I was settling back into work routines, anonymous notes began appearing at my office. "Family traitor," read one. "Money-grabbing liar," said another. When I showed them to my boss, Stephanie, she immediately implemented security measures, requiring visitor sign-in and installing cameras in the parking area. The investigation revealed what I had already suspected. Eleanor was behind the harassment. Security footage showed her leaving a note at the reception desk, claiming it was birthday wishes for my daughter. This violation of the restraining order resulted in her arrest and a night in jail. While Eleanor's harassment was disturbing, something unexpected was happening in parallel. People were reaching out with support. It started with former church members contacting me through social media. "Eleanor did similar things to my family years ago," wrote one woman. "She spread rumors that nearly destroyed my parents' marriage." My childhood friend Melissa reached out after seeing the newspaper article. "I always knew something wasn't right at your house," she said when we met for coffee. "Eleanor would call my mom to check if you were really at our house studying. She'd time how long it should take you to walk home." These stories confirmed what I had always sensed but could never fully articulate. Eleanor's controlling behavior wasn't just directed at me but had affected many people in our community. Rachel Dawson, the director of a local women's shelter, invited me to speak about financial abuse at a community workshop. Initially, I refused, terrified of public speaking and exposing my personal story further. But after considering how isolated I had felt in my situation, I reconsidered. If my story helps even one person recognize financial control, it's worth it, I told Jason. The workshop was scheduled for the following month. Meanwhile, Eleanor's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She violated the restraining order twice more, once by sending a package to my workplace and again by parking near my apartment building. Each violation resulted in legal consequences, but seemed to only fuel her determination. Robert, surprisingly, filed for divorce after 35 years of marriage. When he called to tell me, his voice sounded lighter than I could remember. "I should have done this decades ago," he admitted. "I thought I was protecting you by staying, but I was just enabling her." During divorce proceedings, financial documents revealed that Eleanor had been hiding significant debt, nearly $50,000 in credit cards Robert hadn't known about. The perfect family image had been maintained through secret financial maneuvering. Eleanor's sisters staged an intervention, confronting her about her behavior and the consequences it was having. According to Aunt Catherine, Eleanor had refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, insisting she was just protecting her daughter from bad influences. After her third restraining order violation, Eleanor spent 2 weeks in county jail. During that time, she wrote me a letter. Jason brought it in from the mailbox, holding it like it might explode. "You don't have to read it," he reminded me. The sealed envelope sat on our coffee table for 3 days while I considered my options. Reading it might reopen wounds that were finally beginning to heal. Ignoring it felt like giving Eleanor's words power they didn't deserve. On the third day, I opened it with my therapist present during our session. The letter was a masterpiece of manipulation alternating between self-pity, "I'm suffering in this horrible place," vague acknowledgments, "Perhaps I was too protective," and subtle blame-shifting. "If only you had discussed the inheritance with the family properly." There was no genuine accountability, no real recognition of the harm caused. "This is actually helpful," Dr. Reynolds observed. "It confirms you've made the right decisions to protect yourself." As our wedding planning progressed, we faced difficult decisions about which family members to include. Robert had been making genuine efforts to respect my boundaries, attending therapy, and acknowledging his role in enabling Eleanor's abuse. After careful consideration, I decided to include him, with clear guidelines about his participation. Michael, still serving his sentence, sent a letter that expressed mixed remorse. "I still think we were trying to help you," he wrote, "but I shouldn't have pushed your boyfriend." The qualified apology revealed he still didn't fully grasp the severity of his actions. The most surprising support came from extended family members who had been kept at a distance throughout my childhood. Eleanor had carefully controlled family relationships, limiting contact with relatives who might question her authority. Now, freed from her gatekeeping, I discovered connections with aunts, uncles, and cousins who welcomed me warmly. Eleanor always had an excuse for why you couldn't attend family gatherings, my Uncle Frank explained during a phone call. We should have tried harder to stay connected. The community workshop on financial abuse was scheduled for a Tuesday evening at the women's shelter. As the date approached, my anxiety grew. Jason helped me prepare, listening patiently as I practiced sharing my story. "Remember, you're not just telling your story," he said. "You're changing the narrative from shame to strength." The room was fuller than I expected, with about 30 people gathered to listen. Rachel introduced me kindly, and as I began speaking, my nervousness gradually melted away. I shared my experience of financial control from Eleanor monitoring my childhood allowance to the attempted theft of my inheritance. I explained the warning signs and resources available for those in similar situations. During the Q&A session, a young woman asked, "How did you find the courage to break away?" I thought carefully before answering. It wasn't one moment of courage, but thousands of small decisions to value myself, and finding people who supported me without trying to control me. Several attendees approached me afterward, some sharing their own experiences, others asking for resources. Rachel invited me to join their regular support group for family abuse survivors, which became an important part of my healing journey. The workshop marked a turning point in how I viewed my experience, not just as something that had happened to me, but as knowledge that could help others. For the first time, I felt the power of transforming pain into purpose. 6 months after the trial, life had found a new rhythm. Jason and I moved into a small house in a different part of the city, a fresh start we both needed. The inheritance from grandfather had made the down payment possible, a fact that felt like poetic justice after everything that had happened. Eleanor had completed her court-ordered therapy program, though her therapist, Dr. Wilson, who contacted me with Eleanor's permission, indicated her progress was minimal. "She intellectually understands her actions were wrong," he explained, "but struggles to genuinely accept responsibility for the harm caused." Robert, meanwhile, had been making steady efforts toward change. He had moved into a modest apartment, started therapy, and respected the boundaries I had established. 3 months after the trial, he asked if we could meet. After discussing it thoroughly with Jason and my therapist, I agreed to meet Robert at a coffee shop, with Jason present. I arrived feeling nervous but prepared with clear boundaries in mind. Robert looked older, the events of the past year etched into his face. But there was something different about him too, a directness in his gaze that had been missing before. "Amanda," he began, "I want to apologize for everything. Not just the break-in, but for failing to protect you your entire life. I was so focused on keeping peace with Eleanor that I ignored what she was doing to you." His apology was specific and acknowledged the patterns, not just individual incidents. He didn't make excuses or ask for immediate forgiveness. "I understand if you can't forgive me," he continued, "but I want you to know I'm committed to changing. I'll respect whatever boundaries you need." Over the following months, we established a careful relationship. We met in public places, always with clear time limits. I was explicit about topics that were off-limits, particularly any discussions of Eleanor. Robert accepted these boundaries without complaint. During these careful interactions, I learned family history that helped me understand, though not excuse, the dysfunctional patterns. Robert revealed that Eleanor's mother, my grandmother, had displayed similar controlling behaviors. Eleanor grew up thinking that was normal, he explained during one lunch meeting. Her mother controlled the family finances completely, even giving her husband an allowance. Understanding this generational pattern helped me recognize that Eleanor's behavior, while inexcusable, wasn't unique to her. It was a toxic legacy passed down. One I was determined would end with me. Michael wrote to me from prison as his release date approached. Unlike Robert, his letter showed limited insight. "I still think Mom was trying to help you," he wrote. "But I shouldn't have gotten physical." The qualified apology revealed he still didn't fully grasp the severity of his actions. I decided not to respond immediately, giving myself permission to prioritize my own healing over family reconciliation. With Eleanor's permission, part of her therapy process, I met with her therapist, Dr. Wilson, to better understand her mental health issues. He explained that Eleanor likely suffered from untreated narcissistic personality disorder with controlling behaviors. "This doesn't excuse her actions," Dr. Wilson clarified, "but might help you process them with less self-blame." Learning about the clinical aspects of Eleanor's behavior was surprisingly liberating. It reinforced that her treatment of me wasn't my fault, it was the manifestation of her own untreated psychological issues. Throughout this period, Jason remained my steadfast support. We set our wedding date for the following spring, planning a small ceremony with chosen family and friends. The question of whether to invite any biological family members was difficult, ultimately decided case by case based on their respect for my boundaries. Robert would attend under specific behavioral agreements. Michael's invitation depended on his progress after release. Eleanor would not be invited, a decision that brought both sadness and relief. The wedding day itself was everything I had hoped for, a celebration of love surrounded by people who genuinely supported us. Robert attended, respectful and subdued, keeping his promise to prioritize my comfort over his feelings. He even gave a brief, appropriate toast acknowledging the journey Jason and I had taken. I had left an empty chair at the family table, not for Eleanor as some assumed, but for the mother I wished I'd had, one who would have celebrated my happiness rather than trying to control it. After the wedding, Jason and I moved to a different city for his job promotion, creating physical distance that made maintaining boundaries easier. I joined a support group for adult children of controlling parents, finding community with others who understood the complex emotions involved. In our new home, we carefully discussed how we would protect any future children from unhealthy family dynamics. "Our kids will know what healthy love looks like," Jason promised. "They'll know boundaries are a form of respect, not rejection." Robert continued his efforts toward healthy relationship, visiting occasionally and always respecting our rules. Michael, after his release, entered a halfway house and made tentative contact. Our carefully managed meeting at his therapist's office was tense but civil. Eleanor completed probation and immediately sent a letter requesting contact. After consultation with my support system, I agreed to a single meeting in Dr. Wilson's office with strict parameters. Eleanor arrived looking both familiar and strange, the same perfectly coordinated outfit and meticulous appearance, but with new lines of stress marking her face. The meeting was difficult. While Eleanor had intellectually accepted some responsibility during therapy, her understanding remained surface level. She apologized for taking things too far, but still framed her actions as motivated by concern. "I just wanted to protect you from making mistakes with the money," she insisted, missing the fundamental issue of control. I maintained calm boundaries throughout, neither accepting her limited accountability nor engaging in arguments. When she began slipping into old patterns, subtle guilt tactics, and minimizing, I simply stood up and ended the meeting. "I'm not ready for a relationship without complete accountability," I told her. "When you can truly understand the harm your control caused, we can talk again." Walking away from that meeting, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. The mother I had longed for, one who could love without controlling, might never exist. But I was no longer waiting for her approval or trapped in her manipulation. Through therapy, support groups, and Jason's unwavering love, I was learning that family isn't defined by blood, but by respectful love and genuine support. I was building a chosen family that nurtured rather than controlled, celebrated rather than criticized. The inheritance from grandfather had become more than financial security. It was the catalyst for breaking generational patterns of control and building a life defined by freedom rather than fear. Jason and I celebrated our first anniversary in our new home, a modest 3-bedroom house with a garden I was gradually filling with flowers. The past year had brought unexpected growth and healing. My promotion at work had come with increased responsibility and a team to manage, while Jason's engineering career was thriving. More meaningful than our professional success was the small accounting business I had started on the side, offering financial counseling to survivors of family financial abuse. What began as volunteer workshops at the women's shelter had evolved into a structured program, helping others establish financial independence after controlling relationships. "You've turned your pain into purpose," my therapist observed during one of our now monthly check-ins. Robert had become a cautious part of our lives, visiting for occasional dinners that respected our boundaries. His ongoing therapy had helped him develop insights into his role as Eleanor's enabler, and he was learning to form his own opinions rather than defaulting to others' judgments. "I'm proud of you, Amanda," he said during a Sunday lunch. "Not because of anything you've achieved, but because of who you are." It was perhaps the first completely unqualified, expectation-free compliment he had ever given me. Michael's journey had been more complicated. After his release from prison and time in a halfway house, he had struggled to acknowledge the full extent of his actions. Our carefully managed meeting at his therapist's office revealed he still harbored resentment, blaming me for overreacting to the break-in. "You could have just talked to us about the inheritance," he argued, missing the fundamental violation of breaking into my home. I maintained firm boundaries with my brother, allowing only limited contact under controlled circumstances. It wasn't the reconciliation I might have hoped for, but it was the realistic relationship possible given his limited accountability. Eleanor had continued therapy after completing her court requirements, gradually developing more genuine insights into her controlling behavior. The letter she sent on the anniversary of the break-in showed more authentic responsibility than previous communications. "I recognize now that my need to control your life, including your finances, was never about protecting you," she wrote. "It was about my own fear and need for power. The harm I caused you was real and inexcusable." Whether this represented true change or simply better crafted manipulation remained uncertain. I decided to proceed with extreme caution, maintaining the restraining order until I felt completely secure in her reformation. Grandfather's inheritance had been fully invested, some in our home, some in education for my counseling certification, and the remainder in secure investments for our future. The money that had triggered such chaos had ultimately funded my path to security and purpose. Aunt Catherine organized a family reunion that summer, carefully planned to accommodate the complicated dynamics. After much consideration, I decided to attend with Jason, with clear exit strategies in place if boundaries were violated. The gathering was surprisingly healing. Extended family members I had reconnected with welcomed us warmly, and even relatives who had initially believed Eleanor's version of events had revised their understanding after seeing the consistent pattern of her behavior. The most unexpected development came through cousin Sarah's wedding, where family members from both sides of the estrangement found themselves celebrating together. The joyful occasion provided neutral ground for interactions that might have been impossible in other contexts. Eleanor attended the wedding, maintaining appropriate distance as required by the modified restraining order. When we inevitably encountered each other, she surprised everyone with a public acknowledgement of her wrongdoing. "I hope someday you can forgive me," she said simply. What I did was inexcusable. I responded with composed dignity, neither rejecting her statement nor rushing to absolve her. "Thank you for acknowledging that. I'm still healing, but I appreciate the accountability." That brief exchange, witnessed by several family members, marked a subtle shift in the family dynamics. The truth had been spoken aloud, without minimization or excuse, creating space for cautious movement toward healthier patterns. 3 months after our anniversary, Jason and I shared our own joyful news with trusted family and friends. We were expecting our first child. The announcement came with carefully constructed boundaries for grandparent relationships. Robert would have supervised visits, while Eleanor's access would depend on her continued therapy and boundary respect. As I prepared the nursery for our daughter's arrival, I reflected on the journey from that terrifying day when my door splintered open. The inheritance that had triggered such chaos had ultimately funded not just financial security, but a complete reconstruction of my understanding of family. The broken door had become a powerful symbol in my mind, the violent destruction of boundaries followed by the careful rebuilding of stronger, healthier ones. The new door to our home featured multiple locks, not from paranoia, but from the wisdom that healthy boundaries protect what's precious. What would I tell our daughter someday about her family history? The truth, I decided, age appropriately shared. That family should be based on respect, not control. That love without boundaries isn't love at all. That she was born into a legacy of healing, not harm. My journey from controlled daughter to independent woman had taught me that true family, whether blood or chosen, supports growth rather than restricting it, celebrates success rather than feeling threatened by it, and loves without conditions or expectations. The inheritance from grandfather had been about so much more than money. It was the catalyst that exposed decades of unhealthy dynamics and forced a reckoning that might otherwise have never come. Through the painful process, I had gained something far more valuable than financial security. I had reclaimed my right to self-determination. As I place the final picture on the nursery wall, a framed photo of grandfather with his gentle smile, I feel a profound sense of completion. The cycle of control that passed from my grandmother to Eleanor stops with me. Our daughter will inherit a different legacy, one of respect, boundaries, and unconditional love. If you've experienced family control or financial abuse, know that you're not alone. Your story matters, and healing is possible. I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Has a family member ever tried to control your finances or major life decisions? How did you establish boundaries? Share your story, subscribe for more family healing content, and remember to like this video if it resonated with you. Thank you for witnessing my journey from trauma to triumph, and may you find the strength to protect your own boundaries, whatever form that needs to take.